Hey everybody, it's Diamond Miner Studios, and it's time for another installment in the Mario Marathon. Last time in this series, I took a look at the awkward period that immediately followed the release of Super Mario Bros. During this time, Nintendo seemed incapable of creating a true follow-up to their flagship game, and ended up creating two separate games with the title Super Mario Bros. 2, one for Japan and one for the West. Both of these games were incredibly flawed in their own ways. The Japanese version, also called Lost Levels, was easily the worst Mario game ever made. It was a lazy hack of Mario 1 and featured atrocious level design that actively seemed to go out of its way to piss players off, which I do not consider good design under any circumstances. The American version, converted from Doki Doki Panic, was a lot better with decent level design, improved visuals, new music, and a neat character selection mechanic, but its overly slippery control, poor enemy placement, and limited continues prevented me from enjoying it all that much. Thankfully, we moved past that momentary slump the series went through, and we're getting back on track. It's finally time to talk about one of the most beloved entries from the history of the Mario franchise, Super Mario Bros. 3, again for the NES. Let's waste no more time and get right into this.
But wait, aren't you gonna do the thing?
What? What thing? What are you talking about?
You know, the whole let's it go thing?
You do know that not every video has to begin like that, right?
Yeah, but it's Mario, so you know,
Get the fuck out of my house or I'm calling the cops! Anyways, now that that's sorted, let's kick this off with some history and background information. As always, if you don't want to hear any of that and would rather get right into the review, skip to this timestamp. You still here? Okay, but don't say I didn't warn you. Development on Super Mario Bros. 3 began shortly after the release of Lost Levels in Japan. It was once again handled by Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development, and had a team of roughly 10 people working on it. Shigeru Miyamoto was among them and returned to his role as director. He worked very closely with the designers and programmers during the conceptual and final stages, and encouraged a free exchange of ideas during development. Interestingly, they originally planned for the game to have an isometric camera angle. Oddly enough, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 was initially planned to be this way as well. Obviously, the developers quickly realized that this was a terrible idea, as the camera angle made it incredibly difficult to land precise jumps, and they reverted back to the standard side-scrolling view used in previous Mario games. They also returned to basics in some ways. Gone were Subcon and Warp. Mario returned to the Mushroom Kingdom and will once again be stomping Goombas and saving Peach from Bowser. In spite of their return to form, however, this new entry was slated to be the biggest, most ambitious Mario title to date. There were far more levels, power-ups, and the like, and it was the first Mario entry to feature a world map. They also intended to appeal to players of various skill levels. They filled the early worlds with plenty of lives and useful items, while designing the later worlds to have more in-depth, complex challenges. The cartridges also made use of a special enhancement chip called the MMC3, that means Memory Management Controller version 3 by the way, which allowed for animated tiles, diagonal scrolling, and split-screen elements. The game originally released in 1988 in Japan, where it became quite popular. The game was then planned for a US release, but since SMB2 had just come out the same year, it was delayed until 1990. In this international version, a few minor changes were made, and the cartridges were some of the heaviest on the NES because of the sheer size of the circuit board. The release was widely anticipated, and there was even an 80-minute commercial, film by the name of the Wizard made to promote the game. Once SMB3 finally released in the West, it was widely lauded by publications and players alike, with many considering it the greatest entry in the Mario franchise to date. It sold incredibly well and managed to become the third best-selling game on the NES, behind the original Super Mario Bros. In first place and Duck Hunt in second. To this day, it's widely remembered as one of Nintendo's best games, and a majority of people seem to consider it the best game the NES has to offer. As for me, Super Mario Bros. 3 was yet another game that I got in the Virtual Console purchase. I can't shut the hell up about in these videos. I remember getting to the second world, but I could never get past it because it was too hard for my dumbass child brain. Fast forward several years, and I would get my hands on an original NES copy alongside the lot that I scored in August 2017. When I played it throughout the next year, I generally enjoyed myself, but I still sucked at the games and I didn't really get into it. It wasn't until early 2019 when I would start a new playthrough and absolutely fell in love with it. I soon declared it my favorite NES game and one of the finest entries from the Mario series. This is one of those games that I can play any day and have a good time with. So let's jump in. Get it? And see what makes Super Mario Bros. 3 such an excellent title. Let's start with the storyline. As I said, Super Mario Bros. 3 returns to the standard Save Peach storyline that the original Super Mario Bros. Had. However, Super Mario Bros. 3's actual plotline is quite different from that of Mario 1 in many ways. It presumably begins after the events of Mario 2 and takes place across the various kingdoms of the entire Mushroom World. One day, the leaders of these various kingdoms are turned into all kinds of small animals. The perpetrators turn out to be a small group of Koopas known as the Koopalings, who are assumed to be working for Bowser. They are his children, after all. They've launched an all-out attack on the Mushroom World in an attempt to conquer it, and use their magic wands to transform the kings into the animals. Mario and Luigi hear about this and set out into the various kingdoms to put a stop to the Koopaling menace. However, once they revert all the kings to their true selves, they receive a letter from Bowser saying he captured Peach again while the brothers were distracted, and is now waiting in his fortress if they want to save her. Mario and Luigi hurry to Bowser's castle, determined to save the princess and defeat Bowser once again. This plot is unique for several reasons. For one, it doesn't just take place in the Mushroom Kingdom, but rather various cities from the entire Mushroom World. I'm pretty sure this is one of the only times these kingdoms are seen, so it serves as a bit of world building that not many other games in the series attempt to do. It's not as fleshed out or interesting as the world building of a certain future entry in the series, but it's an NES game, so I don't expect it to be. Additionally, while it does ultimately boil down to the Peach gets kidnapped plot, it's presented in a far more interesting way. From the very beginning of the game, you're not aware that the princess was captured. All you know is that the Koopalings have transformed the Mushroom Kings into various creatures and you have to save them. It's actually the plot twist that Peach ends up getting caught again. Sure, this is a pretty predictable twist for anyone who's played a Mario game before, but I guarantee it was more impactful and surprising when the game was first released. With the plot done and dusted, it's time to talk about the graphics. Super Mario Bros. 3 was one of the last big releases on the NES, so it's expected that it would make improvements over the previous games. Let me tell you, it doesn't just improve upon the other games, it demolishes them. SMB3 is so much better looking than the other NES Mario games that it's not even funny. The colors are much more vibrant and pleasing to the eyes, the sprites and environment tiles are a lot more detailed, and there's a healthy variety of locations that you visit, ranging from a desert to a tundra all the way to a fiery hellscape. I could look at a level and instantly recognize which world it's from without having to look at a menu or HUD, which is something I can't say for all the previous entries. I don't know if I would call SMB3 the overall best looking NES game, because Kirby's Adventure features generally more detailed and impressive graphics. However, Super Mario Bros. 3 still looks great in its own right, and it's the only NES Mario game that I can say looks good without applying the qualifier for an NES game. Next, let's talk about the soundtrack. I thought the music in the last few games was pretty good, but Super Mario Bros. 3 is where I think Mario music truly reached legendary status. This game has one of my favorite soundtracks from the entire series, and it's some of my favorite video game music in general. The compositions are extremely memorable, there's far more nuanced instrumentation, even for chiptune music, including some PCM samples, and it's a feast for the ears. Out of all the versions of the game, the NES original probably has my favorite rendition of the soundtrack, because I find it to be the most catchy, so why not listen to some of my favorite tracks? Damn, is that some good stuff. I think you understand why I consider this one of the best Mario soundtracks. This music is iconic and easily recognizable, and for good reason. And we finally reached the most important part of any video game, the gameplay. Like I said in the beginning of this review, Super Mario Bros. 3 returns to the same formula that the first game had. Whereas that game was rather basic, Super Mario Bros. 3 expands on the formula considerably and adds a lot on top of it. But it still doesn't overcomplicate things and remains an understandable experience. I spoiled it in the intro, but I think Mario 3 is a huge improvement over the previous entries that outdoes them in pretty much every way. To begin, the controls. The first game had functional control with a few minor issues. Lost Levels made no improvements to these and even made it a little worse, and Mario 2 was too slippery and not very precise. Thankfully, SMB3 handles a lot better than all these games. I really don't have any complaints to speak of, to be honest. Mario's acceleration is very manageable, his jumps maintain a perfect balance between floatiness and weightiness, and his mid-air control is incredibly forgiving. He handles like an absolute dream, and it's a lot of fun simply running around and jumping. There's also a new top speed called P-Speed, where Mario extends his arms like Osaka from Azumanga Daioh and runs much quicker. It's not a Sonic speed or anything, but it's enough to make maintaining speed feel like a reward for precision and skill. It even allows you to fly when you have a power-up that allows this, which is the first incarnation of this type of ability in the series. Which is a great segue to talk about the power-ups, and there are a lot more than any of the previous entries. Whereas those games only had the Mushroom, Fire Flower, and Starman, Super Mario Bros. 3 features a hell of a lot more. Those 3 power-ups make a return alongside the new Raccoon Leaf, which allows you to attack enemies with a tail and fly with P-Speed, and the Tanuki Suit, which has the same abilities on top of allowing Mario to become a statue, which makes him impervious to damage. This is based off of the Japanese Tanuki legend, which says that these creatures would change into a statue when threatened. Quick side note, but Japan actually has Tanuki statues. That's all well and good, it's based on the legend, but these statues have gigantic ball sacks. No, seriously, take a look at this. Can't show that on YouTube. Anyways, moving on. Other than those, there's also the Frog Suit, which is great underwater but severely limits Mario's movement on land, the Goomba Shoe, which allows you to jump on every enemy but is only featured in one level, and finally the Hammer Suit, which is a complete game breaker. You can kill anything with these hammers, but they're very short range and have a steep arc, so you'll have to aim your shots carefully. It's also very rare, only showing up a few times across the whole game, so it doesn't cause balancing issues. The game also has P-Wings, which are raccoon leaves with infinite P-speed, allowing you to essentially skip over a level. These are great if you're stuck on a level and want to move on, but I use them sparingly. The only time they're absolutely necessary is the World 5 airship, which has a potentially game-breaking glitch. Since World 5 is divided into 2 maps, the airship might fly to the lower map. Problem is, it disappears if this happens, meaning you'll be stuck and you'll have to reset if you don't have any warp whistles. I wanted to play all 8 worlds for this playthrough, so I just use a P-Wing here to guarantee this unwinnable situation would arise. I quite like this power-up selection. All of them have their own use cases, and they're very satisfying to use. I especially love the Fire Flower, Raccoon Leaf, and Hammer Suit, since they're useful in a wide variety of situations. This system also makes some fundamental improvements over SMB1. For one, the power-ups are a lot more abundant than they were in that game. Not only are there a ton more chances to earn them in the levels themselves, you also have the Toad Houses, enemy encounters, and card games in the world map, alongside the inventory which allows you to store 28 items. The game also has items that are useful in the map itself, such as hammers that allow you to break rocks to open paths in otherwise inaccessible areas. This system adds an element of strategy to the game, since you can apply any power-ups you have in a reserve without having to just get them from a level. Additionally, there's a lot more hidden areas to uncover, which often house extra lives or power-ups. However, the biggest improvement that SMB3 makes over its predecessors in this regard is its health system. Mario 1 and Lost Levels had a system where you would always revert to Small Mario upon getting hit, even if you had a Fire Flower. Mario 2 made it so you wouldn't shrink if you get hit with more than 2 hit points, but the health restores were incredibly hard to come by, thus making the game artificially more punishing. Mario 3, on the other hand, makes the exact improvement that I wanted to see either version of Mario 2 to make. Getting hit with a second level power-up, the Fire Flower for instance, will not make you shrink back to Small Mario. Instead, you'll just become normal Mario until you get hit again. This is the health system that a majority of future 2D Mario games would use, was even a change to the Japanese Mario 3, where it functioned exactly like Mario 1. All I can say is thank God they made this change for the international version. It was really annoying to revert to Small Mario when you got hit in SMB1, so the fact that Mario 3 doesn't do this makes it a much more fun game right out of the gate. And I haven't even mentioned the level design itself yet. Long story short, it's much better than all the previous games combined. Level design is the most important aspect of a platforming game, and Mario 3 features some of the best stage design in the whole series. The platforming challenges are far more in-depth and challenging overall, making it instantly more replayable and interesting than the previous entries. This is also the first Mario game to have midpoint fortresses and airship levels, which are great additions that make the game feel more varied. It's a hell of a lot of fun playing the various levels and tackling the challenges they've laid out. With the exception of World 7, which I think is a little harder than World 8, the difficulty curve is also very smooth, and the level of challenge progresses naturally and at a pace which doesn't catch you off guard. It's so enjoyable, in fact, that I don't feel the need to use warp zones or anything like that, since I would be missing out on more gameplay if I did. I also like the fact that the game goes for a large amount of short levels over a small number of long ones, since the pace feels much more height that way. Maybe a few levels do feel somewhat too short, but this is infrequent enough not to bother me. If I had to nitpick, the lack of checkpoints in the levels isn't my favorite thing in the world. Mario 1 and Mario 2 had a few checkpoints in each level, but Mario 3 makes it so you have to restart the stages from the beginning if you die. The short stage length makes this a non-issue for most of the game, but in auto-scrollers and certain fortresses, which are longer in length than most other stages, it can be mildly annoying to have to start from the beginning. The continue system is also a major improvement over all the previous entries. Whereas those games had limited continues or required you to input a code to continue, these things are foreign terms to Mario 3's vocabulary. This game has infinite continues, so if you get a game over, you don't have to start from the beginning of the game. You will have to start from the world over if this does happen, but fortresses serve as a sort of world map checkpoint to counteract this. However, this probably won't happen in the first place, reason being just how many extra lives there are in the game. Not only are there several 1-ups hidden in each level, but there's also slot machines in the overworld that give you several lives if you can win, and the card games have at least one extra life. Additionally, beating a normal stage gives you a card, and if you can match 3 stars, which is easy to do, you get 5 free extra lives. Not only that, but there's 2 separate places that allow for easy infinite life tricks if you have the raccoon leaf, which can potentially earn you tons of lives. I actually end up maxing out my life count by the end of the game every time I play it. I like this quite a bit. Sure, you could argue that this makes the game
too easy,
but even with all these lives, Mario 3 still manages to provide plenty of challenge in this level design, so the almost excessive chances to earn extra lives isn't something that bothers me at all. The one thing that I'm not too keen on, however, is the lack of a password or save feature. This is a flaw exclusive to the NES version, since the SNES and GBA remakes add save features. The game is roughly 3 hours long without the use of warp whistles, so you have to spend that time without shutting off the console if you want to beat it. Personally, I don't really like it when games force you to beat them in one sitting, and I'm confused as to why a save feature wasn't possible. The Legend of Zelda from 1986 had one, so I'm not sure why Super Mario Bros. 3 couldn't have had as much as a password system. Regardless, this doesn't ruin the game for me because I'm not going to be turned off by long gaming sessions, but it still would have been a nice addition for sure. As for the bosses, yeah, these really aren't that great. Mario bosses are never anything special, but these are some of the easiest in the whole series. The Koopalings are all very simple, even the ones that introduce additional attacks. Bowser is also rather pathetic for a final boss, as all you have to do is make him slam the ground 3 times and you've won. However, Boom Boom is next level easy, and takes less than 10 seconds to kill, so of course he's the boss that gets recycled for every fortress. Mediocre bosses are hardly the most offensive thing a platformer can do, and I'm at least glad these fights aren't annoying pace breakers, but they're still rather forgettable fights. And that's all I have to say about Mario 3. In case you can't tell by now, I think it's absolutely fantastic. The story is much more interesting than the other games in the series, the graphics are the best out of all the NES Mario games, the music is some of my favorite from the Mario franchise, the controls are some of the most smooth in a 2D platformer, the health and continue systems are massively improved over the last few games, I love the challenging and concise stage design, the world map and inventory systems were great additions. Overall, this is one of the greatest entries in Mario history, and it's easily my favorite NES game. Sure, the game lacks a save system or password feature it probably should have had, the boss fights are forgettable and piss easy, and there's potential for a serious glitch on World 5, but these things don't change the fact that Super Mario Bros. 3 is easily one of my favorite side-scrolling platformers of all time. With that said, however, it's still not my overall favorite 2D Mario game. Want to know what that is? Well, you'll have to wait and see. Anyways, that does it for my review of Super Mario Bros. 3. Man, was it fun as hell coming back to it. Next up for the Mario Marathon is Super Mario World, the series entry on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System. So stick around if you want to hear me talk about that one. In any event, this has been Diamond Studios, and I'll see you in the next review. Have a good one.